and welcome to KnightHunter Books. This video is a bit of a catch-up one for us. This is covering our June and July books that we read that weren't covered in the Booktubeathon, so I'll link the video down below of the books we wrapped up there. One thing we did do this month, however, was go to the Nineworlds convention in London, which is a kind of geek convention but has a lot of book focus, which was really fun. Our favourite panel was the Booktube panel, which we were very excited to see get included, and we did meet the lovely Kitty G Books, Eleanor Reed's books, Stevie Finnegan from Sable Court, and Claire Rousseau. We will link all of their channels down below, although I'm sure you'll have heard of them all already.
So the first book I'm going to mention this time is Passing Strange by Ellen Klages, which is one of the Tor.com novellas. It's quite a short story, but a lovely one. It's very moving. I cried at the end, which is not as common as I think it should be. It's mostly a period piece set in San Francisco and features a variety of queer characters and their trials and tribulations, and they get partially involved in magic, and quite unusually the cover art is interesting here, because this specific piece actually exists in Wilde.
Okay.
It's just lovely.
The first one I'm going to talk about is Nalo Hopkinson's Brown Girl in the Ring, which I thought was really good. I rated it 4 stars, even though it did take me a while to read. I think I read it over at least a month. This is one of those books where I can just say that it was just really good, really well done. Like, the plot was tight, everything felt like it was needed for the story. It used parts from lots of different genres, so if I had to describe this, I'd probably say it's a kind of gangster mob plot in a sci-fi dystopian universe, but with kind of supernatural Caribbean folklore inspired magic. So it's got a bit of everything in there, but it works. She really, she ties it all together. I definitely want to read more of Nalo Hopkinson's work. The things I like less were the fact that I don't like mobster plots, so I think that's what kind of didn't quite get it to a 5, and I didn't roar through it either, although I did want to read it, but I wanted to also do it when I was awake and able to kind of give the book justice.
Yeah.
One thing that was unusual about this, which I did appreciate, was the main character actually spends a lot of the book with a very small child, or, you know, a baby. And I feel like you don't often see new mothers as protagonists, where they have to then worry about, okay, so I need to go defeat the bad guys. So who should I ask to look after my baby, or is it better if I take them with me? Like, that's not a thought that you see very often, so I quite liked that. I definitely recommend this one.
My next is The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu. Now, we've mostly run into Ken Liu previously as a short story writer. This is not a short story by any stretch of the imagination. It's epic fantasy, and I think it's quite a good epic fantasy. I think, having struggled with this and Kate Elliott's Black Wolves, I think I've realised that I'm not as much of a fan of epic fantasy as I used to be. It's quite an interesting look at what nobility means, and it's quite interesting to have an epic fantasy based around Chinese history. It's secondary world, but it's very much a China-inspired secondary world. On the other hand, there's not a lot of female characters at all. The wife of one of the main characters spends her entire time at home having babies and looking after the kids, while he marries a young pretty woman somewhere else.
And we've seen him do really good female characters in short stories, so it's not that he can't do it, but
it's that he felt the world he wanted to create couldn't have that balance.
yeah.
I might continue with the sequel, but I will probably look at some reviews first.
My next one is Binti by Nnedi Okorafor, which actually we both read in the last 2 months, but I read less books, so I get to talk about it. And this one I really enjoyed. I think you were less convinced. I rated it 4 stars. It's a novella, very short again, Tor.com. And the fact that it follows a girl who grew up as part of the Himba tribe in Africa means that it shows a kind of different sci-fi future than what we normally see, which was really nice. I found this one really enjoyable to read. I read it really quickly, which I really appreciated at the time, having taken a month or so to read the Brown Girl in the Ring. However, I will say it's not as kind of tight as the other way. It's not as kind of cleverly plotted.
There's a certain amount of Deus Ex resolution as well.
Yeah.
I feel like it was maybe abbreviated past the point it should have been. It's very rare you say that about books. My next one is The Beautiful Land by Alan Averill, and this is kind of fun. It's really a tech thriller. In this case, the tech is jumping between parallel timelines. It's quite interesting in that both the main protagonists are quite unusual for American SF. One is Japanese American, the other one is Iranian American, and dealing with PTSD from her time in the military. So I'd say as kind of relatively hard, sort of fast-paced SF with good representation, sort of puts it a cut above the standard in that regard, but I wouldn't say the writing or the ideas necessarily take it any further than that.
The next I read is Binti Home, the second in the Binti series by Nnedi Okorafor, which I'd say I like just as much as the first one. I rated them both 4 stars.
It's almost twice as long.
Yeah, so she had a few more pages in this one. So the things I did like is that I really felt like this one explored her character more. So in the first Binti, then that's her going to space university. This one is her coming home for the first time, and all the conflicts that arises from the fact that her family and her tribe don't leave Earth. That's not something they've done before. They're very connected to their land. And I found this one again really interesting, really quick to read. I was very interested in her story and kind of swept along with it. What I didn't like so much is right at the beginning it tries to bridge the year gap from the first book through to this book in very few pages. This is probably a downside of it being novella, and that felt quite forced. And also right at the beginning there were a couple of near-death experiences that I felt like were just thrown in there a bit too casually and then not really dealt with later. I think I probably just like this too much and want there to be more book. Not perfect, but I'd just definitely recommend it still.
My next is Swordspoint by Kushner, which is a much beloved book, originally published in '87, which is a comedy of manners. Think noble houses, much drama, who's sleeping with who.
Oh, okay. Not epic fantasy.
Nope. No, this is much more Regency romance, except queer and with more sword fighting.
Any fantasy?
Nope.
So this could be in the historical romance section?
Yes, but secondary world.
Ah, okay, yes, okay.
I think it perhaps developed something of a cult following for featuring quite a lot of queer characters and being published in the late 80s.
Yes.
So, good, not my thing.
Another book I read in the past few months is The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making, which is the first in a series by Catherynne and Valente, which I read because it was one of our wedding tables and one of your favourite books, so I had to read it. And I have mixed feelings about this. So I love the writing style.
She's a very lyrical writer.
Yeah, her prose is just beautiful, and there's a knowing narrator?
Yeah.
Or an omniscient narrator who is quite funny. I quite like that. It's quite meta.
Yeah.
And the imagination that went into this is amazing. It's so many twists on various kind of fairy tales and ideas and tropes. But it's still, at its heart, a middle grade story that's kind of a quest.
Yeah.
With
chapter by chapter.
Chapter by chapter. The start of the chapter tells you what's going to go on in that chapter mostly, and in each chapter then they meet a new thing, and then it kind of resolves by end of chapter. Very episodic, and I think that's just not my jam. It took me quite a long time to read because I read it entirely out loud to myself, which felt very silly, but it just worked a lot better. So I'm vaguely intrigued about the rest of this series, but I won't be rushing to it.
My next book is Updraft by Fran and Wilde. I think it's cross-published, but it feels very much YA rather than adult, which I'm not sure I'd quite twigged going into it. It features a young woman at the start of the book. She's looking forward to getting her flying licence so that she can become a trader like her mother, travelling all around the strange bone spires that represent the entirety of the known world. And there are monsters that come out of the cloud, or sometimes out of the clear blue sky because they're invisible. Not a nice place to live.
No.
But I'm not always very fond of teen characters making entirely teen decisions.
So stupid decisions.
Yes, that are perfectly justifiable and means it's a well-drawn character, but it still makes you want to reach into the book and just go, no, just don't do it.
My final book is Full Moon, which is the second in the Dresden Files series by Jim Butcher, which again, I'm reading because you really like the series. This is fun. It's light, urban fantasy, private investigator, wizard gets drawn into various plots, either as a consultant for the police or through his own getting into trouble.
Which he's quite good at.
Yes. The character himself is a little annoying at this stage. I'm hoping he's going to get better. He sees himself as a wonderful gentleman. Just the women are described in a bit too much of a sexual way most of the time for me. It's fun, but I don't feel like it's doing anything kind of particularly groundbreaking. I can see that I might like it more when the world is a bit more developed and I know the characters a bit better, and this did have a bit more character development in it, so I'm keeping going with the series as it is, but I'm still kind of reserving judgment.
My final book is Fellside by M.R. Carey, who is currently most well known for The Girl with All the Gifts. This is not The Girl with All the Gifts. This is a contemporary prison drama with fantastical elements. The protagonist is sent to jail for a crime which also involved in her being very badly burnt. I think if Mike Carey hadn't done previously so well in SF and F, I suspect this would have been shelved in horror, and unfortunately not really my thing, and quite a lot of not my thing again.
So, we're all caught up now.
Apart from the haul.
Oh yeah, well we've bought more books, but they're August books, so we're not behind on that yet. If you read anything good this month, or last few months, let us know. I think we've
Especially if you've seen us haul it recently.
Yes, yes, which of the things we've hauled do you think would most cheer us up? I think we've not had the best of reading months. Well,
I've had a bad recommending month as well, given the two you didn't like I recommended.
Yes, true. I won't hold it against you. So, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.